Some say that if we'd found it sooner, things might have gone differently. We might even have been able to put it to use. But I have my doubts, and besides, what happened, happened. The biologists were the first to sound the alarm. Bacterial samples went missing, or something along those lines. Nothing critically important in itself, but it happened in a single day, all over the world. Not everyone noticed right away, of course, but the global scale was established quickly enough. Police were scratching their heads. A specially assembled task force, the best investigators and security experts the developed world had to offer, was scratching its head twice as hard. No traces, no leads, no motive. The mere thought of how powerful an organization would have to be to pull something like this off sent the security services into such a panic that they threw everything they had at it, turning every agent and informant upside down. Bioterrorists were rounded up by the dozen, along with regular terrorists, whoever happened to be within reach. Eco-activists got swept up too. Green parties were shaken down wherever they existed. Nothing. Then the worms disappeared. Not all of them, but everywhere. That's when it stopped being funny. Governments tightened the screws, giving police permission to kick in doors and twist arms on virtually anyone they liked. The military got the same clearance, just in case. How long it might have gone on had chance not intervened is hard to say. Every strange report was being followed up as a matter of course, which meant that when it became clear that the latest signal from the back of beyond wasn't the product of some unhinged imagination, an extraordinary number of people converged on a remote stretch of Siberian taiga from every corner of the globe. Vehicles bogged down on the roads, their drivers casting envious glances at the all-terrain trucks grinding past. From inside those trucks, men stared up with heavy sighs at the helicopters beating overhead. Rumors circulated that in the space of a single day, a massive clearing had been hacked out of the forest to receive cargo planes, though that's probably an exaggeration. I never saw it myself, at any rate. The short version is, we scared the living daylights out of the man. Not surprising. That quantity of machinery and uniforms of every conceivable cut and color would have unnerved anyone. He lived in the forest, as you've gathered, worked as a ranger, spent most of his time out in the wild as a matter of professional routine. It was during one of his rounds that he found the creature. What else do you call it? Fearful. By his account. And given the circumstances, his description was reasonably precise. He came upon an elongated, writhing thing in one of the forest hollows. It didn't look capable of causing harm or of moving with much purpose at all, but it was so utterly alien in appearance that he raised his rifle, aimed, and fired. The bullet vanished into the creature's body without any visible effect. He swore under his breath and pulled the trigger again. Nothing happened. He had no particular desire to try his luck up close, so he decided the wisest move was to get out as fast as possible and report back to civilization. That done, he turned his attention to figuring out why his rifle had failed. It didn't take long. Every round he was carrying had no bullet in it. We learned shortly afterward that bullets of the same caliber had disappeared all over the world. We weren't fools. We grasped the creature's operating principle immediately. How it worked in a physical sense was harder to understand. A knife of highly specific geometry, one of a kind, vanished the moment someone attempted to make an incision. But the rest was crystal clear. Whenever the creature came into contact with physical objects, those objects were instantly removed from our world. Fierce debates broke out behind the 3 security perimeters surrounding it. First, no one could agree on what "from our world" actually meant. From the planet alone? From the known universe? The more excitable minds proposed sending expeditions to the moon to test the hypothesis, and somewhere in the corridors I heard the word Mars, but that was shelved pending other options. Second, no one knew what to actually do about it, and something had to be done quickly. We should have seen it coming, but we were too caught up in the strangeness of it all. So when word reached us that the creature had grown compound eyes and a great many legs, and that every biting insect in the vicinity had simultaneously vanished, we understood that we needed to move fast. The most aggressive voices called for immediate destruction, arguing that heavy flamethrower systems or even, and yes, some people genuinely proposed this, tactical nuclear weapons would be more than the creature could withstand. We reminded them what the disappearance of fire would do to civilization. Others argued for total isolation. Contain the creature, prevent it from contacting anything. Against this were those who feared that if nothing else remained within its reach, it might erase air from reality. None of us could begin to imagine what that would mean, so that option was abandoned as well, which left us with only one choice. Feed our reality to this thing piece by piece and buy time until a solution could be found. If one could be found. I hope whoever let that goddamn magpie get shot, God knows what it was doing out there, was shot himself afterward. If not for him, the creature would never have learned to speak and would never have developed hearing. Up to that point, we'd been managing well enough. Scientists and engineers were producing new materials and alloys, which were then fashioned into increasingly strange and outlandish devices that we fed to the creature, anything to keep it away from something that actually mattered. But thanks to one soldier's carelessness, letting the creature acquire the ability to hear, we lost English and German in a single day. Bilingual speakers got off relatively lightly, but those who only had the one language stood around blinking stupidly and trying to communicate with their hands. We had to teach them to speak all over again. Even that, bad as it was, wasn't the real disaster. The real disaster was that the magpie's brain apparently gave the creature enough of a foothold to grasp abstraction, at least at a basic level. We figured this out when objects around us stopped reflecting light. With great reluctance, we understood it was time to change the creature's diet. Specialists in linguistics and cognitive psychology came flooding in. While they were en route, we fed it Esperanto and Toki Pona. As we later realized, simply generating new language structures wasn't enough to keep us safe. We had failed to account for the fact that by feeding it words, essentially arbitrary ones, we were apparently helping it develop. One morning, school children in geometry class and engineers in their design bureaus alike found they could no longer draw a circle. Definitions and diagrams had vanished from the textbooks. More complex abstractions were needed. To our credit, we held out for quite a long time. While some people proposed hurling a thermodynamics textbook at the creature and escaping to Alpha Centauri on a perpetual motion machine, philosophers were conducting conversations with an entity that had grown considerably more intelligent, conducted in a language hastily cobbled together, across the wire, with a mass of eyes and legs and tentacles on the other side. It swallowed ancient philosophy fairly quickly, so we changed tactics and jumped straight to contemporary. What is it like to be a bat? Bought us a week. The critique of pure reason kept it occupied for several months. Sad, some philosophers wept as things were taken from the world. Others stuck out their tongues in concentration and worked at producing philosophical accounts of what was happening. Some of those texts we fed to the creature as well. A few people even appreciated the irony. The turning point came when one of the respected professors, mid-conversation on yet another hastily cobbled-together language, this time about Gadamer, simply vanished. After that, the only real question about the creature adding 2 and 2 together and wiping out the human race was a matter of when. We'd had the good sense, at least, to steer well clear of induction in our discussions. Sad despair had settled over the camp, which had grown considerably by then. Some people wept. Others broke into the liquor they'd been hoarding. Others called their families. Then a young man, a graduate student by the look of him, suddenly threw up his hands and shouted, excited, "Oh, you idiots!" He turned and walked straight toward the perimeter where the creature waited. Nobody tried to stop him. He approached the vast, long, uninvited presence, looked it directly in the eyes, drew a slow breath, and said, I think, therefore I am, screaming, "Oh, fuck!" was all the creature managed before it ceased to exist.